when it comes to free trade, and Donald Trump was very upfront on the way that he wanted to do that via tariffs. There should be no surprise there. Why the market took the hit that it took last week, A, ladies and gentlemen, is somewhat insequential. Second of all, I'm not really sure why the street was caught off guard. Donald Trump ran on this for a year. I do not agree that this is the way that you level the playing field. We'll get to that momentarily. But it does tap into what Donald Trump has been about from the very beginning, which is, let's put us first. I'm not really sure how more simplistically to put that. Why are we always operating at a disadvantage? Why do we have trade deficits? Why do we let the Chinese get the better of us? Now, the concern and the frustration on Wall Street yesterday was, forget China for a second. This is going to hurt a lot of our allies. This is going to hurt the Canadians. This is going to hurt Japan. This is going to hurt Mexico. You can view this and say, well, this is the cost of doing business, especially when you look here in America over the last 100 years on all the goods and services that were made in America. You look at what led to the American Industrial Revolution, things that we made here in the past. You look at where Donald Trump's message has resonated very well in the Rust Belt. He did well in West Virginia. He did well in Pennsylvania. He did well in Ohio. States that normally the Republicans have written off, normally because of the unions. I believe that using tariffs to try to balance the playing field here is going to be passed on to the American consumer. I do not think we're going to be hurting our trading partners. I think a lot of the rhetoric in this is very disingenuous. I'm not worried about the cost of a Budweiser or a can of Coke, anything that has aluminum in it. Aluminum, we're looking at 10% tariff. Steel is 25%. I don't think soda is going to become unaffordable. Jack's laughing in the background because it's silly, see? It's disingenuous. That's not the conversation that we're having right now. This comes back, ladies and gentlemen, to supply-side economics. And a key factor in that is bring down the self-imposed regulations that make it very difficult for us to thrive domestically. That has nothing to do with our trading partners. And to that point, if you are a capitalist, if you're a conservative, then you believe in free trade, as long as it is open and honest free trade. Mm-hmm. And that's what we have not had over the last 20 plus years with NAFTA and really with the TPP, which, by the way, Donald Trump shot down. The TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, that was negotiated in secret, that was an assault on American sovereignty behind the backs of the American people. Not just the American people, the members of Congress didn't know what was in that thing. Donald Trump shot that down. Donald Trump, from the very beginning, said we need to renegotiate the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA. We need to negotiate deals that are in the best interest for America. I got it. And I'll play along with about 90% of that. Tariffs, however, I don't believe is the answer. Now, keep in mind, simultaneously, Donald Trump has been bringing down regulation. He stripped away a lot of the power when it comes to the EPA. It's a lot easier to do business here in America. He's not getting a whole lot of credit for that, however, but that is part of the free side economics. But the question is where he is traveling right now when it comes to these tariffs. It could be signed into law, I guess, for lack of a better word, next week. I'm not worried about an overreaction when it comes to Wall Street. But when it comes to rebuilding manufacturing in America, I guess, is that really what we're talking about? It's sort of what he was tapping into. I'm not sure that it necessarily helps with that. It also further divides Donald Trump from his own party. Most conservatives don't believe that tariffs are the way to handle the trade deficits that we're dealing with. And by the way, let's back out of that conversation for 1 second. Why are there trade deficits? Ladies and gentlemen, that's capitalism 101. Somebody else is doing something cheaper. Now, you can say, well, the reason is that they are underpaying their employees. They have no concern for the environment. Or maybe they're just producing things that we don't produce here anymore. But if you are capitalistic at your core, then you really can't have an issue when it comes to honest and open free trade. And I don't think most Republicans do. Now, they're being framed in a very negative light right now. And anybody that questions the angle of attack that Donald Trump has when it comes to balancing the playing field with free trade, those individuals are being classified as isolationist. Not the case at all. But the voices are many when it comes in opposition to the way that Donald Trump wants to handle free trade. Congressman Peter King, go.
Yeah, basically, I am not a protectionist, and I believe that the small number of steelworkers and movement workers are going to help is going to be more than offset by the damage done to others.
Steph, we're going to come back to this for 1 second. This comes back to steelworkers, manufacturing. Where did Donald Trump resonate where nobody thought he would? Ohio, Pennsylvania, Kentucky. Kentucky, known more for coal than steel, although steel is part of the economy in Kentucky. Coal. Our number one export. Number one export is coal. What did Hillary Clinton run on? Killing that entire industry. Yeah. That was her campaign promise for all the union workers out there. Here in Baltimore with the port, things come in, things go out. More things come in. Peter King is rightfully concerned. Again, I do not believe that this is the best angle of attack. If I were Donald Trump right now, what I'd be focusing on is how do we produce more things? How do we provide these services that the rest of the world is ready and willing to do? Which we did in the past. It's not a novel concept, by the way. We're only going back 50 years. Congressman Peter King. And I haven't agreed with Donald Trump on tariffs from the very beginning. But he's been upfront about it. Should not be catching anybody off guard. Should not be catching Wall Street off guard. He was very upfront on the way that he wanted to balance the playing field when it came to free trade. He ran on this. Not only did he run on this, he ran on the numbers that he wanted. He was saying 40% tariffs on the campaign trail. Yeah. So that was a mistake. But it landed. And the reason why it landed is the average American cannot figure out why we consistently are negotiating deals that are not advantageous for this country. That was the anger that Donald Trump tapped into. Why do we have trade deficits? Average American cannot figure it out. Why are we importing things that we could make domestically? Why are we outsourcing jobs? Why is President Obama negotiating the TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, with our Asian trading partners, which, by the way, we already have partnerships with, except for Malaysia and Vietnam, New Zealand to bring them into the fold? How does that help American prosperity? That was the question that most Americans were asking themselves. Why are we constantly leading from behind? Why are we putting America second or last, or not even talking about them? That was the frustration. That's what Donald Trump tapped into. Again, trade deficits and stovepiping it by itself, I don't necessarily view as a problem. But let's get back to supply-side economics. Let's focus on what we can do domestically to produce things, to make things, to do all the things that led to the Industrial Revolution. Let's get back to that. Let's not be dependent on the rest of the world for every aspect of our life. Whether that is aluminum, whether that is steel. The Chinese that have control over our intellectual property right now, which really isn't being brought up in this whole conversation. And who do the Democrats talk about all the time? The middle class. I mean, I thought we lived in a classless society, but I'll go ahead and play along for a second. The middle class were those that participated in manufacturing. Middle class were the individuals that worked at Bethlehem Steel, Martin Marietta, Pepsi Bottling, General Motors off Burning Highway, that worked in Ohio, in Pittsburgh, that voted for Donald Trump. Those are the individuals that, by the way, traditionally voted Democrat. And they voted for Donald Trump. And this is Donald Trump yet again delivering on one of his core campaign promises. Something I disagreed with from the very beginning. But it shouldn't be catching anybody off guard. And it definitely shouldn't be catching Wall Street off guard. Not to the tune where the market has taken a 1,000-point hit in 1 week. Bounced back a little bit on Friday. I think it closed down about 70 points. This is all baked into the cake. And by the way, this country is going to have to go through some growing pains to get back on the right track. Sometimes when you're off course by many, many degrees, you got to make a major correction to get back on point. And I think one thing we can all agree on is we are pretty off course. Ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to the Jimmy Mathis Show on Talk Radio 680 WCBM. After the break, Roger Stone, who is on the left coast right now, is scheduled to join us for the Stone Zone. Roger Stone is always a little bit of a moving target, making national news all over the place this past week. Roger Stone for the Stone Zone, scheduled to join us after this. Again, you're listening to the Jimmy Mathis Show. We have a new website, JimmyMathisShow.com. Follow me on Twitter at Jimmy Mathis Show. Follow me on Facebook. Give us a call, 410-WCBM 680. It is 6:20. You're listening to the Jimmy Mathis Show. Be right back.
The Jimmy Mathis Show is broadcast,
and you can see him on Dundar TV.
So, China and Japan make up 65.8%.
Yeah, give Roger a call now, please.
They make up 65.8% of the steel production in the United States. I mean, in the world.
Right.
We're 9.3%. So why are we giving them a break? See, I'm down with the tariff. I don't. What's the negative to it? I mean, do you think there's a real negative?
Yeah, it gets passed along to the consumer.
But that's part of the growing pain. And he's talking like there isn't that many coal or steel jobs. There's over 166,000.
All for only $99.95 per month. That equals our best internet offer ever. Power your business on America's largest gig speed network and save today. You can double your speed and get 150 megabit internet for the price of 75 megabits.
Good.
That's only $99.95 per month.
The European Union produces more steel than us. So does India.
Because we allowed our steel industry to go in America. That's why.
EPA regulations. That was the regulatory, and then it was cheaper to get Chinese steel.
Yeah.
And it's cheaper steel to begin with.
But they weren't even buying American steel even when it was government contract. So how bad is that?
Yeah.
You're not only talking about keeping jobs here, you're also talking about national security. So when they closed Bethlehem Steel, a big part of our national security.
Can you do me a favor and
Disappeared,
text, and text Roger and say that we're trying to reach him right now?
Okay.
Or not having insurance, or even how much.
And don't throw out any phone numbers.
Because Dr. Laser takes the hassle out
No.
of cosmetic dentistry.
That happened last week. I don't know if you saw it.
High-quality services won't cost you a fortune.
But that's okay. We
Oh,
won't go,
okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about.
we won't go into it.
Routine
I know exactly what you're
X-rays,
talking about.
and emergency
Learning experience.
His clean, modern offices are
And we're still
welcoming
streaming,
staff
just so
that
you know.
feel like a member of the family. They are whether you need
Matter of
dentures,
fact, I need to
veneers,
grab that
implants,
bag.
Any other procedure, do what my wife and I have.
Is that your laptop?
By calling Dr. Laser and
Okay.
Cosmetic and Advanced Dentistry today. That's
You wouldn't happen to have Adobe Audition on that, would you?
Make this the year you finally get a perfect spot. 410-356-7799.
Are you searching for the right care? Loria Mays Chapel is the place for you. I'm Victoria, Social Services Director. Everyone deserves a place to support and
Is that
and Dr. Christina Garrett?
in the next break? Do we have a pre-recorded Brain Circuses spot?
No, in the back. Whatever you think.
Okay.
Short-term or special medical treatment, call 410-252-0880. As a family-owned and operated company, is more than just a business. It's a way of life.
What's trending?
And what time do you want me to break here so we don't get Roger? 39.
By staying connected, you're going to require fucking the NRA.
Okay, people are having trouble streaming you on the WCBM.
I know. Do me a favor, give him a try like in another 5 minutes. If we get him, just let me know. And if you can throw to his, if we do have him, throw to his rejoin, okay?
This is Talk Radio 680, WCBM and WCBM.com. Now more of the Jimmy Mathis Show, brought to you by Bread and Circuses.
People are going to take these tariffs that are going to hit American citizens. Once you start imposing tariffs, you don't do it in a vacuum. Other countries respond.
And we've tried it a whole bunch of times.
Donald Trump saying that he is going to impose a 25% tariff on steel, 10% on aluminum, getting a lot of blowback, including within his own party. Again, something that should not be catching anybody off guard. This was one of the rallying cries that Donald Trump had on the campaign trail. Donald Trump talking about the inequality when it comes to trade, the trade deficits that this country operates in, and the way that he wanted to level the playing field was via tariffs. A lot of those, including myself, again, I understand it, but does not agree that that is the way to level the playing field. I again come back to supply side economics, and let's focus right now on something that Donald Trump has done, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, which is bringing down the barriers, bringing down the regulations, bringing in all the things that make it very difficult for us to produce. It's an honor to be here.
Yeah, man, it's so much fun having you. Hey, you mentioned coal.
I'm going to throw the stone after this. Go to his open. Can you do that?
Huge component.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
As I mentioned, I live in Canton. You know, I live on an old cabin cruiser, and I touch around.
I'll set it up. I'll throw to the stone zone, then we can go to
The
it.
amount of coal, that we are exporting is just staggering, and it's gotten much bigger, lately. I just wonder what, the interaction production goes. And that is where a lot of the coal is being shipped. So, somewhere in this complicated economical and financial paradigm here, coal's got to be
When we go to Roger, can you
like
punch
you
him
said,
up?
that was a big part of
Okay.
a year ago. So, I just want to throw that out there.
Well, no, look, I mean, Bruce, it's a key part of the equation. We're always talking about I'm not putting this all on Donald Trump. I'm saying in general, we're talking about trade deficits and how we're getting the short end of the stick. Very rarely do we ever discuss what we are shipping out, and coal is our number one export, which is just fascinating when you go back a year ago and an entire party was running, vocally on killing our number one export. That ties into a lot of blue collar, middle class jobs, if that's the way the left wants to frame it. And we are shipping things out. Again, our number one export is coal, and you have an entire party that wants to kill the number one export. Doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense.
But Jimmy, where I'm trying to go with my comment is that it's just being framed as aluminum and steel.
Right.
And that's just not it. In this is not only that, so somewhere along the line there's a connection with, whatever kind of economic pressure can be exerted on these other countries. If you're making steel and we're supplying you the coal,
Right.
I don't know. Where does this go? Back and forth, up and down, around in a circle? I don't know. But I just kind of think that coal and steel have to be lumped as far as the trade deficit and the tariffs have got to be mentioned in the same sentence. That's all. Anyway.
So what you're asking for, Bruce, is you're asking for a lump of coal, basically.
Yeah. Well. I know a lot of that coal at Christmas time.
Exactly.
Great program. Great to listen to you on WCBM. Good luck, man.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Every week you can hear Roger Stone for the Stone Zone.
Now a Jimmy Mathis exclusive, The Stone Zone, featuring Roger Stone, veteran of 30 years in politics and 9 presidential campaigns, including Richard Nixon, Ronald Reagan, and Donald Trump. Here's Jimmy Mathis on Talk Radio 680 WCBM.
Roger Stone, former Donald Trump top advisor, joining us, I believe, from the West Coast this evening. Is that right, Roger?
Conference, which is a traditional conference of Oregon Republicans, where I speak tonight as their keynote speaker, Jimmy.
Well, I appreciate your...
In which a document, which has been doctored, by the way, can leak from the House Intelligence Committee, which is entirely exculpatory, which proves that I had no advance notice of the source or content or exact timing of the WikiLeaks disclosures regarding Hillary Clinton, and the mainstream media says, aha, everything published by The Atlantic had been disclosed to the House Intelligence Committee months ago. Now, the real question is, who leaked this? Because, frankly, something smells suspiciously like Schiff to me here. And, this is part of a new theory put forward by Margaret Carlson of the Daily Beast that Trump, when he was nominated, became a public official wrong, and that WikiLeaks gave him, through Roger Stone, access to Hillary's missing emails, also wrong, and therefore he illegally received something of value to benefit his election, and this is the charge on which Mr. Mueller will charge him. Well, the problem is I not only never received anything of the kind from WikiLeaks, all of the material I turned over to the House committee proves that, plus my testimony proves it, and I never discussed the matter with Donald Trump before, during, or after the campaign. I don't know what he knew about the WikiLeaks disclosures regarding Hillary, but I suspect he didn't know more than anybody else that had read about it in the media as it was widely covered.
So, Roger, not to oversimplify this, but you did have direct contact with WikiLeaks, correct?
Well, through the direct message function of Twitter,
right,
we had an exchange, which is there for people to see, which proves that they never gave me any material or disclosed anything to them. But I never said that I didn't. What I said was I had not communicated with Julian Assange in the year.
You had the Morning Joe thing ready?
I had. So all of this material was turned over, and as I said, it's exculpatory. It just shows you the lengths at which they're attempting to go to build some kind of argument against the president, which involves the Russians. By the way, the other thing we should say off the top is that for any of this to matter, Julian Assange has to be a Russian asset, and WikiLeaks has to be a Russian front, both of which I reject. I don't care how many times the intelligence agencies say that. They also said that we didn't have a metadata collection program on Americans. That was a lie.
Right.
They said Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. That was a lie. Our intelligence agencies have been politicized, and they say things that fit their political narrative, but that are not necessarily true. Julian Assange is a journalist. He does the same thing the Washington Post and the New York Times do. He gets information from whistleblowers, and he publishes it. Again, the whole thing, in my opinion, Jimmy, is an attempt to distract from the content of the WikiLeaks disclosures. So here's my question for Clinton supporters. The material, none of which the authenticity has been questioned, shows that she's a greedy, venal, she's cheating against Bernie, and she's engaged in political dirty tricks. No one has questioned the accuracy of any of that material.
Well, what has been questioned, this is from Morning Joe earlier in the week, is how you were able to look into the crystal ball that you have. Morning Joe on Wednesday, I believe. Go.
Stone, I mean, he's always shown his hand. What are we to make of the fact that he was saying that Podesta's about to go in the barrel, basically predicting that WikiLeaks was about to release all of these stolen emails? We saw the same thing with a person that when Al Franken was about to be attacked, 9 hours before Franken was attacked, he said, "Hey, look, this is coming out." May have done the same thing.
Seems like such a coincidence.
May have done the same thing with Spitzer.
To Roger, you say?
Well, first of all of the business dealings of John Podesta, I should say the shady business dealings, were revealed in January of 2016 in the Panama Papers.
We've been understood, so.
His uranium deal, his gas deal, his banking deal. So no crystal ball was required to predict that they would come under scrutiny. Nowhere, any place did I make any reference to John Podesta's emails. I had no idea that WikiLeaks had access to them or would publish them. As far as my predictions regarding the disclosures over Hillary, all I had to do was follow the interviews and Twitter postings of Julian Assange. He has said that, I've said it. I never said anything in my writings or my tweetings that Assange himself hadn't already said publicly. So the bottom line of that is, I can read. As far as Al Franken is concerned, I did have a source at Fox News in New York who tipped me off this was all about to go down, and I reported it for InfoWars. Reporting something does not make you responsible for it. By the way, 8 women came forward, all Democrats, accusing Franken of sexual assault, and he resigned. I didn't cause that to happen. I merely reported it.
But I guess the question, Roger, that has been thrown through the echo chamber of the media right now, with all this coming out over the last week, is was there any communication between you, the Trump campaign, and WikiLeaks? I mean, was there a triangle there?
None whatsoever. I never discussed this with anyone in the Trump campaign or with Donald Trump himself. So that's the real failure in their narrative. Even though I had no proprietary information, you can't give somebody something you don't have.
Right.
And in this case, I had no exact prior knowledge. I was merely following the public interviews of Assange himself.
Right, and the direct messages that you had via Twitter with WikiLeaks were more just your personal relationship. It was really more of a PR thing than anything. There was no actual information that was being exchanged, at least what has been released through those direct messages.
It's interesting, though, that if you look at the bottom of the Atlantic Magazine report, there's a little note that says that this was produced by the art department at the Atlantic. That's because it's not a true copy of the exchange. A true copy was provided to the House Intelligence Committee. I also gave a copy of it to the Daily Caller so that people can compare the actual exchange and then the one that the Atlantic truncated and produced. Either way, it's very clear from the content and substance of the exchange that I had no advance notice about the content or source or timing of the WikiLeaks disclosures. This is kind of no cigar for the Atlantic.
When you testified to the House Intelligence Committee, and again, for people that are not familiar with that testimony, that was under oath, correct?
Yes, absolutely. And I said under oath that I'd had no contact with Assange in 2016, and I had no advance notice of this material. So there's no inconsistency. These emails, which are relatively limited, were turned over to the committee at the time. 2 and 2 just does not add up to 6, any way you slice it.
So all the predictions that you have made over the last 2.5 years or so, none of that has any direct connection to Julian Assange to WikiLeaks?
Other than to say I can read Assange's Twitter feed, he himself has said repeatedly, Roger Stone never predicted anything that I hadn't already reported previously. And that's a fact.
And the other question that has come up in national media over the last week, you're not going to answer this directly, I understand that, but was your involvement, obviously you're kind of the architect of Donald Trump, you've been with him going back to the 80s, but your level of involvement with the Trump campaign, coming down the home stretch, going into the convention, and, after you officially left his team, I guess.
I'm not sure why that's significant. I'm a Trump supporter. I had sporadic contact with the candidate himself. I had no direct contact with the campaign other than the exchange with Steve Bannon, in which I did urge the campaign to get the women victims of Bill Clinton to the second debate. I've released all of that publicly as well. So if the inference is that I was running the Trump campaign, I wasn't. Was I in touch with the candidate? Sporadically, he was on the road. But at that point, the die was cast. The entire narrative regarding the WikiLeaks disclosures comes from the constant coverage of the press. Again, if Assange is not a Russian agent and WikiLeaks is not a Russian front, which I don't believe they are, and I don't think could be proved in court, then I'm not sure why this is important. What is important is the stone cold proof that Hillary Clinton was corrupt, which Bernie Sanders was personally orchestrating dirty tricks at the Trump campaign rallies, all of which is documented in these disclosures. I can understand why Podesta and others would like to distract from the content of those disclosures and try to make a controversy about where they came from.
Well, and Roger, to that point, it doesn't seem like that distraction is landing very much. I mean, even with everything going on right now, Donald Trump is still bouncing around 50%. Nothing seems to stick. He's putting more and more wins behind him. When you look at regulation, you look at the tax bill, you look at getting rid of the individual mandate.
I agree with you, Jimmy. I think they have a bigger problem. We now know definitively that the FBI and the Justice Department under Barack Obama used what they knew were fabricated evidence as a legal rationale for government spying on the Republican candidate for president.
Right.
My question is an obvious one. What did Obama know, and when did he know it? We have email texts from the FBI saying he wanted to be briefed. Therefore, he knew about the greatest single crime of political espionage in our history. WikiLeaks, kiss my behind. You guys did something that makes Watergate look like a small potato. It's only a matter of time before Brennan, Clapper, and Obama see the inside of a jail cell.
All right, Roger Stone. You can hear Roger Stone on the Stone Zone every Saturday, normally around 6:15. Roger, appreciate it very much. Also, we got you coming out to town on April 14th, so we'll get you out to Brian Circuses, get you some crab cakes, an opportunity for all the listeners here at WCBM to come out and meet you. And it was great hosting you in town last time, so we cannot wait to do that again.
Well, very psyched, and my audience at InfoWars is very keenly interested in your state Senate campaign. We want to bring an update to them soon as well.
Yeah, we got to talk about that in the very near future. I'll fill you in on that off the air, Roger. I may need your assistance on something.
Well,
yeah.
My friend.
Well, that is a Senate seat we are going to win, Roger. So, for people that don't know, I'm running for State Senate in the 42nd, and Roger will be here on April 14th to support that. Roger Stone for the Stone Zone, author of his newest book, Making the American President. Roger, thank you very much. Appreciate it. I'll talk to you next week, all right?
Great to be here. Many thanks.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Roger Stone. It is 6:43. You're listening to the Jimmy Mathis Show on Talk Radio 680 WCBM.
As Nor'easter finally pushes farther off the sea, Wednesday around the rest of the weekend.
Okay, we just have to see
Monday,
doubles.
That's fine.
Okay, we're streaming. Just like to remind us.
Come back out with Morning Joe, please.
Sunshine for your Sunday. Now the winds pick up for the afternoon. Highs up.
Yeah, we don't have any other Roger Stone stuff, do we?
30 miles an hour.
Okay, do Morning Joe, and when do you need me to break?
For Talk Radio.
I guess we can probably do 51. This is Sean Casey, and I'm here to tell you about WCBM's newest sponsor, Clearview Window and Door Company. They're installing beautiful new windows in my home, and I can let you know from personal experience.
You'll come back after that, but it'll be 3 years
company is a classic.
Yeah, normally going into top of the hour, shorter the better. If I could just have like 20 seconds as sort of a kicker over the news.
0% interest.
That's fine. So if I break at 52, that gives me 3 or 4.
Roofing, very affordable for our customers.
Okay.
Furnish and install are manufactured in the U.S.
What about the warranty?
Most of our products have a lifetime warranty.
So please, give Clearview Window and Door Company a call at 410-668-1110. That's
We should check.
Or online at getclearview.com.
We should clip that
That's
out. I mean, he answered everything that's been on the.
He can't get into it.
I know. Well, then we'll deal with it on Monday. But that's
Absolutely, I'll send that everything.
Everything that's been.
I've already thought of that, Jimmy. Everything that he said is gold, and I'll send it out to everybody. I've got the mass email link. It's like 32 publications. UK Daily Mail, Daily Mirror, London.
Charles wants to make an offer.
Under oath,
A family business for over 40 years, his goal is to
We're
make a
fine.
small
Scott, we're
profit.
fine.
No. I wasn't worried about that. I'm wondering if it's still. It has kicked off a couple times, especially early, but then later on it's working fine. So you know, unfortunately, it does that occasionally.
PARRISH. Parish.
Yeah, I know.
Or call Charles Parrish at
What he can't. If we're going to play audio, he can't record because it's all the same as Adobe.
Okay.
So if I'm going to play sound, that's the system that you have to record.
Okay. So basically, how would we get into
I mean, they got
that?
air checks. We just
Looking for
gotta,
We
great
gotta
food
get
and the
come
best
in with the air
ambiance in
check.
town? Look no
But that's why I
further
brought
than
the
Brennan
computer
Services
just to
Bistro,
see what that was all
located in the
happening
heart of
tonight,
town.
so we can
It's my
you know,
only
maybe
destination for
before
weekend
we're
brunch,
done.
You
fine
know,
dining, or a late
I
night.
gotta
But I think it's going to work out
Now
pretty
has
good
their
like that.
kitchen
Ron-
over
It's not gonna be
land,
bad.
Ron
situated
Savage
in a
has a
historic
copy of
townhome
it.
on the corner of
I believe
Chesapeake
it's
and
3.0.
Delaware Avenue. The owners
We
of
should
Steve
get
Martha
that
make you
downloaded
feel
on
at
your
home.
laptop.
The walls are
Because
decorated with Charles
you know what I'm
artwork.
thinking, right,
It's
Jimmy?
all available for purchase.
all right, so you're gonna come out with Morning Joe.
Check
We
them
can
out
use
when
you with our live remote.
advertiser. And don't
We
forget to
could
tell
actually
them that
record
Jimmy Mathis sent you.
through. We could do the live remotes. I got a mixing board and some microphones. We could tie into your laptop. If you have that, we can actually record a whole show on that.
Sundays, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m.
And
and then again
do
1
it that
p.m.
way.
to 2 p.m.
Well, I have
where you'll learn
5,000
everything
people
you
on
need
my
to know
Facebook.
about
So what
mortgage
I want
loans,
to do
today's
is
rates,
you know,
FHA,
you may have
VA,
some
and
other
more.
things you're thinking
Call the
about, but
Get Mortgage Fit
I don't know
radio
if you
show.
can, maybe with my password you could
800-827-RATE.
go on that, on my
800-827
Facebook
rate.
site. But I'd like to take and put
NewAmericanFunding.com.
to my
NMLS
Facebook people,
6606.
go to
Today's top
Dumbbell
local
TV
story
to watch
is,
this live
this
stream,
isn't a
show
story
what's
at
going
all.
on, but
It's a
cut the
website
sound.
ad. This
And
whole
then they see
thing,
what's going on
it's a
and say, oh,
website
I want
ad.
to go over
That I
there
can
and see
tell
that. I
you.
want to check it out. And they go to Dumbbell
Just
TV.
put it on your tag us at Jimmy Mathis, at Jimmy Mathis Show, at John Patrick Beal.
I'm
All right,
not
gentlemen.
following you.
This is Talk Radio 680, WCBM, and WCBM.com. Now more of the Jimmy Mathis Show, brought to you by Bread and
So if I give you,
Circuses.
you can go to Facebook and do that?
He's always shown his hand. What are we to make of the fact that he was saying that Podesta is about to go in the barrel,
Yeah, sure.
basically predicting that WikiLeaks was about to release all of these stolen emails? We saw the same thing with the person that when Al Franken was about to be attacked, 9 hours before Franken was attacked, he said, "Hey, look, this is coming out." May have done the same
Just
thing.
seems like such a
may have done
coincidence.
the same thing with Spitzer.
Yeah.
I don't know, guys. The interview we just had with Roger Stone, he answered a lot of the questions that have been floating around the National Echo Chamber over the last week, which really the question was, what exactly was the communication between Roger Stone and WikiLeaks via direct message? And if you look at what was reported in the Daily Caller, Roger Stone, and these were direct messages that were published in the Daily Caller that were leaked from the House Intelligence Committee, I guess. It was more Roger just asking, why are you throwing me under the bus? It wasn't, there were no direct messages on Roger receiving any pertinent information. With that being said, I've had the privilege of having a front row seat to Roger Stone for the last 3 years right now. And he's been on my show weekly. And pretty much everything the guy has said, and I understand people have very deep-seated feelings when it comes to Roger Stone, and some people love him and some people hate him. But I'll tell you what, the guy's been batting 1,000, as far as I'm concerned, for the last 3 years. And the question was that information coming from Julian Assange, coming from WikiLeaks, to Roger? His answer was absolutely no. Keep in mind that when he testified in front of the House Intelligence Committee, that was under oath, and for the record, that testimony has still not been released. So everything is coming to us right now via leaks. And what Mika and Joe were talking about earlier this week on Morning Joe, how does he know so much? And Roger said unequivocally a few minutes ago that that information did not come from WikiLeaks. I guess he's a good guy to have on the air every week, huh? I don't know. Yeah. It also seems like a lot of this is a major distraction. Not talking a whole lot about Benghazi or Hillary Clinton email scandal. Seems like a major distraction. Unfortunately, it's also a major distraction from all of the accomplishments and all the campaign promises that Donald Trump has delivered on. And where's all the focus right now? It's on Kushner, on his wife, on his daughter, on his family. Sure is convenient, isn't it? On security clearances, on temporary security clearances. Again, we started the show, and after the 7 o'clock news, I'm going to move past this, but talking about the tariffs and the way that Donald Trump wants to handle free trade. I've been pretty outspoken. I'm with a lot of conservatives and a lot of Republicans on not agreeing on the angle of attack that Donald Trump has with leveling the playing field when it comes to free trade, but I get it. And here's the thing. As far as the non-politician, it's one more campaign promise that the guy is delivering on. And I'm not going to get all worked up about it because I knew it going back 2 years ago. The guy ran on this. Same way he ran on Neil Gorsuch, the justice to replace Justice Scalia. He gave the names on who he was going to appoint. You may not like Donald Trump's Twitter habits, but you know what he's doing? He's defending himself. And that's a novel idea when it comes to Republicans these days. Because normally we don't defend ourselves. We walk away, we put our tail between our legs, and we allow the opposition to control the narrative of the day. Donald Trump doesn't do that. Roger Stone doesn't do that. They double down. And they come back twice as hard. And they win. To all the Republicans out there that have been intimidated in the past, you fight back. That's what Donald Trump is doing via Twitter. You can make fun of it if you want. What he is doing is he is circumventing the disingenuous media. You think the media would have covered any of these stories the same way with Obama? And I hate saying that because it seems so petty. Donald Trump could care less. He throws out the red meat. He throws out the fake media, the fake news. And then you know what he does? He communicates with his countrymen one-on-one via Twitter. And if Twitter had such a problem with it, they would cut the account like they did with Roger Stone. But they don't. And the media gets more and more perplexed about the entire thing because they lose relevance. And they're also a little bitter because they've been wrong for, 4 years now. You'd think of all the pundits and all the experts that somebody would get it right at some point. But they don't. And they haven't. And Donald Trump plays them. And then he circumvents them. And then he communicates directly with his countrymen via Twitter. And the more he communicates, the more they make fun of him. And the more they make fun of him, the more he communicates. And the more he communicates, the higher he goes in the polls. And he's absolutely tapping into Stone's rules. See, the Democrats never walk away. Have you noticed? I mean, Ted Kennedy.